much. Hand counts and a coin flip. Could all of this be Iowa's answer to Florida's hanging chads? We all remember that one. Chris Plante is a syndicated radio talk show host, and Leslie Marshall is a Fox News contributor and also a syndicated radio talk show host. Good afternoon to both of you. Boy, you heard it there. Let's first look at Iowa, where Bernie Sanders is essentially saying, you know, he doesn't think he's going to fight for this. Leslie, what do you think of that idea? If there are some discrepancies, and his campaign spokesperson said that he or she believes that there are, why not fight?
Well, I'll tell you, I am not a mathematician by any means, Heather. And yesterday on my radio show, we had somebody from Iowa really break it down. Iowa is a caucus, and it's about delegates. And we see numbers with regard to delegates. We also do not hear a lot of things such as contests where Bernie Sanders won with coin tosses. And I think one of the reasons he's not pushing is at the end of the day, although it's by a slight amount, she clearly won even without the coin tosses, as was explained to me by Iowa insiders who do have the mathematical skills to break it down,
Chris,
region by region within Iowa.
Sure. Chris, I think you need a fighter to be the president of the United States. This is another time he's pulled the ball away. He had the opportunity to spike the ball when it came to Hillary Clinton and the email server scandal. He didn't do that in the debate. Should he be fighting this now?
Front of the coin is...
Well, look, this is this is not a clear win for Hillary Clinton by any stretch of the imagination. A victory that was called by the head of the Democrat Party in Iowa, who is also a Clinton surrogate, smells bad to begin with. It is the narrowest margin that anyone has ever won by in an Iowa caucus. The Des Moines Register raised questions this morning in their edition that the math may not have been done properly. We're talking about 0.2% percentage point. Also, according to at least one analyst on a very liberal network, they said that there is nowhere to be found in the Iowa Democratic Party rules for the caucuses an option of flipping a coin for delegates, so that option may not exist at all.
Isn't that just kind of bizarre, the flipping of the coin? You know, as somebody was quoted in one of the local papers there saying if there weren't cell phones in the room, they'd think it was like the 1800s or something.
Right.
Leslie, I want to move ahead and start to talk about the state of New Hampshire and the Republicans there in the field there. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz are trading a whole lot of jabs on Twitter, still over Iowa. We'll talk about New Hampshire in just a second. Trump tweeting this, quote, Ted Cruz didn't win in Iowa, he stole it, and that is why all of the polls were so wrong and why he got far more votes than anticipated. Bad. Cruz's campaign then dismissing Trump's claims as a Texas senator steps up his campaign in New Hampshire ahead of next week's First in the Nation primary. We'll get back to you in just 1 second. Let's check in with Fox Business Network's Blake Berman. He's outside a Cruz campaign event in Hooksett, New Hampshire. So, Blake, any response from Cruz just yet?
No. Cruz just wrapped up his event here at Roby's Country Store. Talked for about 15, 20 minutes or so, then engaged in a question and answer session. He kind of left the issue at B, gave pretty much a standard stump speech. The back and forth between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, though, is certainly on here in New Hampshire after Donald Trump unleashed what amounted to a Twitter rant earlier today saying that Ted Cruz and his campaign committed fraud. And because of that, according to his tweet, the election, he says, should be a redo. Here is that tweet. I'll read it to you. Donald Trump saying, quote, based on the fraud committed by Senator Ted Cruz during the Iowa caucuses, either a new election should take place or Cruz results nullified. Before that, though, the Cruz campaign spokesperson, even though Ted Cruz didn't mention anything here on the ground, a Cruz campaign spokesperson sent out a statement that just went after Donald Trump, directly after him. And here's what it was in full from Rick Tyler. Quote, reality just hit the reality star. He lost Iowa, and now nobody is talking about him, so he's popping off on Twitter. There are support groups for Twitter addiction. Perhaps he should find his local chapter. Ted Cruz is doing a media avail about 30 minutes or so down the road here, Heather. You can bet that it will be brought up, and Cruz will have some sort of response there.
Yes, certainly. That was a pretty clever tweet right there. Okay, so I want to ask you about this. Rand Paul out. So who is trying to pick up his supporters, the most likely candidates?
Rand Paul was running at about 3%, according to the RealClearPolitics.com average here. That would amount to a significant amount, really, hundreds of voters, if not thousands, come election night. We saw how important at least a percentage or two, one way or the other, could certainly be in Iowa. Marco Rubio, for one, gave a comment to this today, saying that he would welcome the support of Senator Rand Paul. For now, though, the Paul campaign is saying no endorsement as of yet. Back to you.
All right, we'll be watching that one. Blake Berman, thanks so much. We're back with our panel right now, Leslie Marshall and Chris Plant. So let's talk about the Republicans right there. So Trump has that whole business about saying that Ted Cruz committed fraud right there. I'm wondering if Trump is just trying to attract more attention to himself, trying to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Leslie, what do you think of that? Is that what this is about?
I think it's partially about that. I think it's also about, unfortunately, on both sides, we see sour grapes, whether it's by a large margin or whether it's by a small margin. Somebody won Iowa. It was Cruz on the right, Hillary on the left. Bottom line is you got to look forward. This is not about Iowa. This is about the number of delegates. And Donald Trump may not get delegates in New Hampshire because he missed a debate, because he doesn't have the campaign that's been run so slickly, quite frankly, by Ted Cruz and also by Marco Rubio. And that, by the way, also leads to their experience. I'm going to tell you, I think Rubio's the guy to watch because these two are fighting in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a very different state than Iowa. The Republicans in New Hampshire are very different than the Republicans in Iowa.
Certainly.
And certainly the amount of independence. So I think Mr. Trump might be surprised a second time.
Okay, let's take a listen to this. Chris Christie, he's talking about how it's down to him and Marco Rubio in New Hampshire. Listen to this.
And you just look at the way Senator Rubio's responding. He's not talking about Jeb Bush or John Kasich. Have you heard him in the last 48 hours since Iowa talk about anybody other than me? He knows. He knows we have the best ground game here. He knows we have the most support from folks like this. He knows I've spent more days here than any other candidate. He knows I've done more events here than any other candidate. He knows I've done 3 times the events he's done here in New Hampshire. He knows that his impediment to the next round is right in front of you.
Except Chris Christie is number 6 in the polls in New Hampshire. Chris, what do you make of that?
Well, look, Chris Christie, as you said, is so far behind, and right now we've got a 2 or 3 person race, perhaps, including Marco Rubio, and the rest are just trying to get some attention, and at this point are kind of also Rands. Donald Trump's assault on Ted Cruz, on the other hand, accusing him of fraud. Fraud, if I'm not mistaken, in an election is a felony, and that's a fairly serious accusation. Donald Trump didn't lose by a razor-thin margin, as we're still examining on the Democrat side. He lost by a significant enough amount, and also the alleged fraud was not perpetrated against him, but against Dr. Ben Carson. The explanation is what the explanation is, I suppose, at this point, and we should look at that and whether the Cruz campaign and Congressman King were involved in that in any
Trump also says that
misdeeds.
some mailers were sent out that were inaccurate and looked like they were from official government agency, and that they were not. But that's his claims right now. Chris Plant and Leslie Marshall, we're going to have to leave it right there. Thanks a lot for joining us today. We'll talk to you again real soon.